Assalamu alaikum once again. This time we will start. If anybody would like to take the final few seats, please come forward. I have a huge collection of microphones here to work with, which is really quite impressive. Thank you so much for joining us today for Accessible Qatar, conference organised by SASOL and by the other partners, and here within the Project Qatar and the Exhibition Centre. I want to just say a few words to start us off. I'm in an interesting position. I lived and worked here in Qatar for 6 years. And I come back after having been away almost as a tourist and a visitor back to the country. And it's interesting how you see things differently as a visitor compared to when you're living here. When we talk about accessibility, there are always little surprises that can be thrown up for you. And I think last night, talking to many of the speakers that you're going to meet today and tomorrow, I think their experience as visitors into the country, as well as the depth of their own personal experience in the area, is going to be very interesting, and they have a lot to share. Certainly last night, I think I can vouch for the quality of all of our speakers based on the experience from yesterday. Also the experience of yourselves. Talking to people over coffee before the event starts, it's clear that there's a lot of knowledge and experience developing here within the country. And an event like today offers a fantastic opportunity for the sharing of that experience and knowledge. So in terms of trying to moderate and run today, I'm going to try and make sure that we have time built in for networking, for you to ask questions of the panelists and speakers, and basically to encourage us to debate and discuss many of the issues that we want to face. So as a result, I'm going to speak fairly briefly to open things up for us. But I just really wanted to talk a little bit, just to start, about why travel and tourism is an important issue for people with a disability. Often when we talk about needs and aspirations of people with a disability, we talk about employment, about education, and we talk about independent living and quality of life. And when we think about travel and tourism, it is really within that last aspect, our daily life, that travel and tourism has an impact. Working on accessible tourism stimulates access to social and cultural activities for everyone. It creates an inclusive community, an inclusive cultural experience that anyone, regardless of individual needs, can access. Event tourism, such as Qatar 2022, creates legacy. And if we look around the world at major sporting, cultural, and even trade events, they create that legacy that has an impact for citizens and residents of the country. They create infrastructure, transport, buildings, experiences. But that legacy is not simple to create. The challenge that we look ahead to is significant, because it requires an understanding that accessibility is not a product, it's a process. And it requires us to work end to end. And everyone working within the industry, directly or indirectly, has a role to play. Qatar Tourism Authority cannot make it happen alone. Hotels cannot make it alone without support from transport. Both need access to information. The way in which we work requires us to think of processes that start with access to information and communication, include thinking about transit and transport. Oh, it's another microphone. The basics such as car parking, movement within buildings as well as access to the buildings, in museums and galleries, access to exhibits, the basics, access to restrooms, access to restaurants and refreshments. thinking about how you're going to leave the event. And the final stage, having an accessible way to give feedback and review to share with others. And I want to particularly applaud the efforts of Accessible Qatar and the app. I'm fortunate to work with a number of services that deal with mapping accessibility. And I can honestly tell you, I was in Washington last year and people were unbelievably impressed by Accessible Qatar because it went beyond simply wheelchair accessibility. The number of people, the tourists that we will have in to the country with disabilities, people with wheelchairs will be a significant part, but not the only part of that population. So as a business opportunity driving us forward, it is that breadth of need that we need to consider. And we need to think, as I say, of that across a broad experience. I'm just going to share with you my experience at Disney 5 years ago. Possibly the thing which annoyed my daughter more than anything else in the world was that I was asked to go to Florida for a conference, and whilst I was there, Jay Cardinale from the Disney said, "Oh, come and have a look around, come see how we do accessibility." My daughter, who was 14 at the time, said, "You have a job where they ask you to go to Disneyland for free. That is not fair. That is just wrong." She still has not forgiven me, and she's 22 now, and still hasn't forgiven me for that experience. But when I went around Disney, and Disney is huge, anybody who's been there, you know the size and the scale. 5 different theme parks connected together. It is a town, a city in its own right. And they do 2 things, which I'm impressed. They get the basics in place. The curb cuts, the ramps, the information. But they go beyond that. They innovate. They look for new ways to solve old problems. And dealing with real world problems with real people is how we truly innovate. Comply with standards, but embrace innovation. And that's going to be my message as we go through our speakers and our discussions today. For you, working in the industry, you face an interesting challenge. You need to listen to the customers and create an experience that's open for all. And I'm going to touch upon one last issue from that visit to Disney. I went to go on the Winnie the Pooh ride. It was a bit scary, I have to say, for me. That's about as terrifying as I like my theme parks to be. And there was a middle manager from Disney taking a new member of staff around. And they came to the entrance to the Winnie the Pooh ride, and she started to talk to her and said, "What do you do on this ride if a person with a wheelchair arrives and wants to use the ride?" And he explained what he thought he had to do. And he said, "Okay, that's very good. What do we do if a blind person comes to the Winnie the Pooh ride?" And he didn't know, so she explained it to him. That was one member of staff who will move between different rides in a day, being trained to support people with disability, to be aware of needs and how Disney will deliver access and inclusion for its visitors. So when we talk about accessible tourism, one of the things that we start today is a process of awareness, training, and information. And sharing that across all of our networks is one of the biggest single things we can do to support people with disabilities coming to the country. So with that in mind, and without any pressure, I'd really like to introduce our opening speaker, Nasser Al-Masalama. Oops, can't see. I need better glasses. Nasser, Director of Planning and Quality from Qatar Tourism Authority. Nasser, thank you very much.
Well, David, thank you for a beautiful speech and a lot of information to absorb. First of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here with you today at the first Accessible Qatar Conference, the first of many, inshallah. At QTA, we believe that truly sustainability or sustainable development is best achieved when the government bodies join hand in hand with the private sector to pursuit of the common goal and objective. That is why we are delighted when we were approached by Sasol, Qatar, to support their pioneering initiative, Accessible Qatar, which helps to amplify the voice of the disabled community in Qatar and ensure that their needs are in the forefront of major initiatives. QTA's support for initiatives began with the development of the Accessible Qatar mobile application. And today I am honored to announce that we will be continuing this partnership, and with it, our commitment to accessibility beyond today's conference. We will be working with Accessible Qatar experts to analyze the accessibility of the exhibitions to take place in Qatar, with the view to ensuring the business events that are licensed by QTA are accessible to all. Ladies and gentlemen, we are meeting on the sideline of one of Qatar's top construction exhibitions, held every year to showcase the opportunities presented by the rapid development that our country is experiencing in the lead to the World Cup 2022. This milestone sporting event has fast-tracked advances in many key areas and sectors around Qatar, and QTA is determined to ensure that one of the legacies of this development should be authentic, thriving, sustainable, and of course, most of all, accessible tourism sector. That is why at the beginning of 2016, we launched a new hotel grading classification system. It places accessibility guidelines drafted in accordance with the international best practices at the core development plan for all hospitality establishments in the country by the hotels and hotel apartments. In simple terms, for the first time in Qatar, the number of stars a hotel has is directly affected by how accessible it is. So by the end of last year, our licensing and inspection teams completed their on-site inspections of all 4 to 5 star hotels in the country. Those that need to are now working on making the required adjustments to maintain or improve their classifications by adhering to the new grading classification criteria. This year, we are working on to complete the inspections for all 3 to 1 and 2 and 1 star hotels by 2018. We aim to have completed the inspections of all apartments by then. Beyond infrastructural accessibility, the new QTA guidelines also mandate that hospitality staff members are trained to manage and meet the requirements of guests with special needs. To help the hospitality sector achieve these requirements, we are working hand in hand with experts from Al Shafallah Center, Al Noor Institute to train hotel personnel on the best practices in this field. Excuse me while I make mistakes in your name, I apologize. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it will come to you as no surprise that accessibility is relatively a new field in Qatar. And we have a way to go before all our venues and establishments meet the specific standards that will make Qatar truly accessible to all. However, we are committed to working with you as our partners and all of our partners in the public and private sectors to ensure that tourism, hospitality sectors are held to the standards that befit our country and our visitors. And we are here today to listen to you, our esteemed speakers, and you, our guests, in the audience, on what we can do better to build Qatar, the Qatar visitor experience, and that is to be accessible to all so that everybody can enjoy the experience in Qatar. Thank you for your time. I look forward to speaking with you afterwards, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nasser. And I think already there's some very interesting and exciting developments being described there. And you can see straight away how the idea that by making hotels accessible, we increase capacity for people within the country. I can remember working and trying to arrange meetings in hotels here in Qatar. And because we had people with disabilities on our team, my choice of hotel and meeting rooms and conference was based upon those needs. So those hotels which didn't offer that capacity didn't get the business. It was as simple as that. So the standards you're setting, I think will have huge benefits both to the industry and of course to people with disability. And it was very pleasing, I think, at this stage to hear how the public sector, government sector, and the not-for-profit sectors were working together, which ties me in very nicely, seamlessly, to say the role of the private sector is equally important. And with that in mind, I'm absolutely delighted to invite Pinder Velakatsi, President of GTL Ventures, to come to the stage to tell us his thoughts on the issue. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you, Mr. Nasser Maslamani, for your kind remarks. Mr. Saif Al-Kuari, His Excellency Shrish Soni, the Ambassador of South Africa in Qatar, Ms. Charlotte Mokoena, Executive Vice President of Sasol from South Africa, Mr. Vuyo Kahla, Executive Vice President of Sasol from South Africa, esteemed partners, distinguished guests, and members of the media. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2017 Accessible Qatar Conference, held under the patronage of His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah bin Nasser bin Khalifa Al Thani, the Prime Minister and Minister of Interior. We would like to thank His Excellency for his patronage and support. The seed for today's Accessible Qatar Conference was planted in 2015. This was during the Definitely Able Conference and Ilam Art Exhibition, where it became clear to Sasol and many of our partners that there was a real opportunity to improve the quality of public information on accessibility of public and private venues across Qatar. The voices of the disabled community were key to understanding the impact that accessibility has on the lives of those with disabilities. It was in response to the Definitely Able Conference that Sasol launched the Accessible Qatar app in 2016. It's the first app and website of its kind in the region. Accessible Qatar provides the disabled community with instant and reliable information about the accessibility of public and private venues across Qatar. With the support of a trained accessibility auditor, Accessible Qatar has audited around 100 venues across Qatar, including venues in retail, in hospitality, tourism, and public parks. Combined with user reviews, the Accessible Qatar app has provided the disabled community with essential information while raising public awareness on the need for greater accessibility. We are honored that the Accessible Qatar app has received international recognition, with Sasol and Qatar winning a World Summit Award for digital and mobile content supporting inclusion and empowerment. This Accessible Conference and Awards ceremony that we are launching here today is a next natural step for us in our accessibility efforts. Project Qatar that you see here today is one of the largest construction exhibitions in the region. And with the presence of so many project developers, contractors, and construction managers that we have together here in Doha, it gives us a unique opportunity to connect, to inspire, and to engage, to make existing and future venues accessible to all. Sasol, with the support of IFP and Qatar Tourism Authority, hopes that these 3 days that hopefully most of you will spend with us will inspire action among key decision makers in the construction industry and showcase the burning need for accessibility to be incorporated into all sectors of the Qatari economy, in line with the National Vision 2030. I would like to thank IFP, Qatar Tourism Authority, and all our partners in the room for their valuable support and contribution towards this initiative. Sasol is proud to be your partner. I would also like to thank our speakers for sharing their insights and hopefully broadening our horizons today. In addition, I would like to thank members of the media. It is through you that we are able to channel our message to local decision makers and the society at large. I now leave you to proceed with the first session of today's conference, Accessible Tourism to All. And I call our first panelist to the stage. Thank you. Shukran.
So yes, if we can have our panelists up to the stage and to take their seats. Abdullah Ali, Isabella Minacini, Kiji, Bill Forrester, and Martin Heng, please come and join us on the stage. Whilst they're coming up and working their way to the stage, I think it's interesting just to have a very quick look around and identify some of the accessibility features that are in front of us. So, my thanks to maybe perhaps a slightly low-tech accessibility feature, but our sign language interpreters. Critical in delivering conference and information to people with hearing loss. But it's very good, the conference and SASOL have also included captioning on the screen. So people can choose the way to access that information in a way that suits their needs best. And that's one of the principles that we need to think about when we're building accessible Qatar, is allowing people choice. Choice of routes, choice of transport, choice of access to information. Because people use those things when they suit their needs best. Let me just introduce our panel. Let me start with Mr. Abdullah. Mr. Abdullah has 8 years of experience in the aviation industry and started working with Qatar Airways in 2008, where he worked through a number of key departments as well as outstation assignment. You must tell us more about that. I then joined the operational readiness team, looking after operational readiness projects related to the airport opening. And those of us who were living here at the time remember it well. Congratulations.
Thank you.
He's now a member of Hamad International Airport senior management team, responsible for the overall performance, safety, and function of the passenger terminal complex. And he has degrees in both air transport and aviation management. I'm going to go introduce all of our speakers and then let you start. The airport is critical in people's first impressions of Qatar as an accessible location. You are the front face of accessible Qatar and very, very important in what happens. And then let me introduce Isabella Menacini from Milano. She worked for some years in the Italian Foreign Service. Does that mean you were a spy? I'm not sure if that's not code for something, but no, clearly not.
I wouldn't say this.
No, okay. Well, if you were a spy, you wouldn't tell us, would you? This is true. Isabella has worked extensively for the Italian Ministry of Labour and Social Policies, focusing her attention on welfare at both the national and the international level, and has been a component of official delegations at bilateral and multilateral level. She coordinated the Forum on Accessibility within the Italian National Disability Observatory, been head of department within the Milan City Halls Welfare Division, and organised Milan's participation in the European Access City Award, which they successfully won in 2016. And she's now head of Milan City Hall's Tourism Department. And if any of you have ever been to Milan, there are actually many parts of Italy, a country with such a rich heritage, making things accessible brings with it a completely new level of complexity when you can't dig it all up and start again. Our third speaker, Kiji, president of Japan Accessible Tourism Center. We were talking last night. He's visited 157 countries, including Qatar. At 17 years old, he injured his spinal cord in a rugby accident, but this hasn't stopped him from dreaming to explore the world. I would say maybe a little more than dreaming if you've been to 157 countries. He started his professional career in advertising and as a marketing planner. In 2004, after 7 years, he decided to dedicate his own time to his own business as a writer, consultant for accessibility issues, and to be a motivational speaker. In 2011, he founded the Information Center for International Travelers in Mobility Impairment who wish to visit Japan. Again, having only ever visited Tokyo, it's a very dense, crowded city. To achieve accessibility within those environments is another set of challenges for us to consider. Next speaker will be Bill Forrester, who is co-founder of Travelability.travel. He's an acknowledged world leader in accessible tourism, universal design, and social inclusion, and the economic impact that retiring baby boomers, such as me, will have on the tourism industry. He's very much a focused professional who has a fundamental belief in sound economic management, understands the competitive advantage to be had from effective environmental sustainability and social inclusion. And then last, but certainly not least, Martin Heng, the accessible travel manager from Lonely Planet. He left England in 1987 and travelled around the world for a decade before migrating to Australia to start a family. He's worked for Lonely Planet since 1999 in numerous roles, including 7 years as editorial manager, till a road accident in 2010 left him with quadriplegia, and he's currently Lonely Planet's accessible travel manager. He's published many accessible travel titles, including the world's largest database of accessible travel online resources. He's been a keynote speaker in Montreal. He was a speaker at the World Tourism Day event in Bangkok on Tourism for All, promoting universal accessibility. This year's been a busy year, both in terms of speaking and traveling, I think, having been speaking at the Smart Destinations Conference in Murcia and at the Barrier Free Day in Berlin. To make this as easy as possible, I'm going to ask Abdullah to start us off and then hand over to each person in turn. My role now is to be horrible to you. I will be sat on that corner, and I have some cards that say 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. And then I have some heavies at the back who will come and drag you from the stage. I think that's the easiest way. I'm sure you understand. But with that thought in mind, Abdullah, please.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of Hamad International Airport to thank everyone for asking us to give you a brief of what we've been doing in terms of accessibility for the gateway of the state of Qatar. Just to give everyone a brief, for those of you who are new in Doha and don't know much about the airport, we opened in May 2014. We've been open for nearly 3 years now. Year after opening, we got the chance to actually experience, or not experience, actually trial everything that we had provided to our PRM passengers, which are for us people with reduced mobility. This was basically an initiative that came from the World Championship, the IPC event that was held in 2015. So for us, this was a very big challenge for us because, as you must imagine, it was only a year after opening where we had to process at least 2,500 to 3,000 passengers in one day, and 2,000 of those were wheelchair passengers. Right, in order to not get the minutes and notices. With that said, we currently handle, in 2015, we've handled 30,000 PRM passengers over 1 year. That in 2016 grew to 39,000 PRM passengers per month, actually, in 11,500 flights. As some of you might already know, our hub operator, which is Qatar Airways, is growing rapidly at a 20% growth rate, and the big majority of that traffic is transit traffic, which a lot of it comes down to people with reduced mobility. I think we got a problem with the flicker. Someone from IT? There we go. So as an international airport, we basically have to stick with the guidelines and the regulations from the authorized bodies, governing bodies, around the world, ICAO, IATA, and so forth. Based on the regulation 1107, 2006, our overall responsibility is to ensure that we provide high quality of assistance without additional charge to our people with reduced mobility, or to our passengers with reduced mobility. Access from designated points of arrivals and departures, and of course transit within the airport. So basically this is everything from the point that the passenger arrives to the entrance of the airport all the way to the aircraft. The ability to announce arrival at the airport and request assistance. We are sometimes faced with challenges because we actually have 2.5 peaks, 2 major peaks in a day, and all our passengers, both those who require assistance and other passengers, come at the same time. So a lot of the time we always try to advise our passengers to basically request for assistance prior to them arriving to the airport. What you see here is basically a layout of the entire passenger terminal complex. So I'm not sure if the pointer works, but basically from the car park all the way down to the end of the north node, or what we call the north part of the terminal, we try to provide all the services required for our passengers with reduced mobility. This actually starts from the journey, from basically where the passenger enters the terminal, from the curbside. So we've got all the required facilities available through the check-in areas, which I'll show you shortly, down to the security lanes, the immigration lanes, and all the way down to the aircraft. In terms of a journey, this is just a short process journey map, what we've put together. From the car park all the way down, just to go through the journey so someone can actually imagine it through their heads. If someone was to leave their vehicle in the car park, the whole airport has been designed to have no barriers whatsoever, so you have access-free pathways. There's wide elevators basically to accommodate all wheelchair requests. Once you get to the check-in hall, there's designated check-in counters, which I'll show you as well. From there onwards, we go to the immigration lanes, which also there's an immigration-specific lane for people with reduced mobility, and the security lanes and so forth. Every route that a passenger would take through the airport, we always ensure that there's another accessible route for people with reduced mobility. Sorry. There we go. I think it's slow. Okay, so just go through some of the quick initiatives that we've put together. And luckily, again, as I said, a lot of what we've put together and a lot of what was designed during the construction phase of the airport was trialed during the IPC event, and thankfully it went very successful. So starting off from the curbside, we've obviously have a dedicated parking areas which are the closest to the entrances to the passenger terminal complex, which basically gives easier access into the terminal. Once you get to the curbside, if you're going to be dropped off as a passenger rather than actually parking in the car park, we've got the tilted curbs, basically to have to enable passengers with wheelchairs to access the curb easily. We've also installed safety bollards for the safety of all our passengers, but within that taken into consideration, we also took into consideration wheelchair passengers, basically to give easier access to our passengers and give the required width for the wheelchair access. In addition to that, we've also had installed tackling studs. Basically, this is to give passengers with a visibility concern, knowing when they have approached the safety area or the actual road itself. Once a passenger with reduced mobility, specifically within with this being said, wheelchair passengers, we have approximately 9 check-in counters or check-in rows, which have 15 check-in counters. At each check-in row, there's a specific check-in counter which is lowered and wider than the common normal check-in counter, and this is to accommodate people on wheelchairs, basically. And it will give them free access to the staff that's processing their check-in process and clear visibility as well. In terms of transport within the PTC, there's elevators, as I said. All the elevators have been designed in a way to accommodate wheelchair passengers in terms of width and height. There's walk-elators in all areas. There's also, which we recently opened, what we call as the APM, which is the automated people mover. Some people might refer to a train. That's also accessible for wheelchair passengers and people with other reduced mobility. The evacuation chairs is something that we actually recently launched. It's only been launched a year ago, and we currently where we were doing a lot of exercises on emergency evacuations. We realized that this is something, one of the initiatives that we would require for our passengers with reduced mobility. We trained approximately 800 staff of our staff now, are 100% trained on how to use the accessible wheelchairs and during an emergency, because as you are all aware, elevators are strictly banned during an evacuation, and therefore we'd have to take the emergency access routes, which involves a staircase. All our washrooms are equipped with a companion toilet. So those PRM passengers which require a company to help them or assist them. That's also been taken into consideration. This goes for all our landside areas, our airside areas, and all concourses throughout the PTC. We also, the priority seating is something that we also launched approximately 8 months after opening. We realized that in a lot of the hold rooms that we have, as you may know, sometimes passengers come quite late to the gate, and therefore it's pretty much a fight over who gets what seat, especially in the hold rooms. Obviously next comes the aircraft. But from the hold rooms and the seats across the entire PTC, we designated specific seating which are closer to all the entrances and exits as priority seating for the elderly, for the people with reduced mobility, for anyone who requires assistance. In terms of special handling, we have a stakeholder, which is part of the Qatar Airways Group, Qatar Aviation Services. They basically provide all the handling required for our PRM passengers. This is for passengers departing or arriving into Doha, and mostly transiting through Doha. During the IPC event, we realized a lot of the flights that were carrying the athletes coming into Doha for the event were coming during peaks. And with the peaks that we have, a lot of people might say that we're still using buses. Yes, that's true. But unfortunately, the demand has increased, and therefore we have to use buses. But part of this, and why I'm saying this, is that a lot of our wheelchair passengers also are on flights that are allocated to what we call as remote stands, and would therefore require to be bus shuttled to the PTC. But part of the struggles that we used to have in the old airport is that not all buses were equipped with the ramp to enable wheelchairs to access the bus. However, our new buses are all equipped with hydraulics, and all of them pretty much have ramps. Therefore, they are automatically lowered as and when they stop, and our Qatar Aviation team support the wheelchair access by assisting the passengers to entering the bus when required. As for our buggies, we've done a lot of surveys about the PTC and what's required and what are passengers complaining about or what are their concerns. And a lot of it was pretty much about distance and walking distance throughout the PTC. Of course, we do have all the travelators, the walkulators, the elevators, and the APM, which is the People's Mover, but buggy requests are always something that are on demand. Part of this, during the IPC event, we realized that we're going to need further assistance and further services to be provided in terms of shuttle service. So what we did, along with the service provider that supplies us with our buggies, we ensured that approximately 10 buggies are equipped with ramps, and this is also, again, to accommodate the wheelchair passengers, to transport them from one point to the other within the passenger terminal complex. Another initiative that we're working on, which is part of our future improvement plans, is the dedicated continuous improvement. We're exploring passenger help points and fully accessible transport. These help points are basically devices that are going to be placed across the PTC, and it will give passengers the assistance that is required in case, God forbid, that there's no other staff to assist passengers within the passenger terminal complex. Of course, this is not going to be the main focus of us, but this is basically just to provide additional support to our passengers from the car park all the way down to the aircraft. And lastly, we are currently, I think for about 6 months now, we've been working with a number of service providers on induction loops, which is something that I think is booming currently in other places of the world. We've visited a few other areas that have introduced this. We've looked at different products, and this is something that we're also exploring as we go forward. Part of all the initiatives and the elements that we're exploring going forward is not just for us, but it's also in collaboration with the 2022 committee, which we recently had a forum as well to discuss what other requirements are missing, what are the elements that we could improve at, and how we can go forward with this in order to be 100% accessible. With that said, that leads me to my end of the presentation, and I hope it was as interesting as it is for me for you guys. So thank you. I'd like to introduce the second speaker.
Good morning. So before we start, let me thank you very much for this kind invitation. I said this on behalf of Municipality of Milano. We are really glad to be here and to share with you our small but important experience. I want to say that, as David said, events are the opportunity to boost, to give a big boost for the development of an accessible city. And this was the case of Expo for Milano. Before I show you my presentation, I just want to tell you that what we are still trying to do is to give to all the citizens and all the visitors a city accessible, but first of all, a city that is welcoming, is easy to get and to go around, to reach and to go around, and a city where people can feel at ease independently from the specific needs. Our strategy to make Milano accessible for all, as I would say, four priorities, pillars. The first thing is that what we did is to take the UN Convention as a guideline for our actions. We were convinced that the values, the principles, and the actions that are illustrated in the Convention are very clear, and if you adopt them, you are on the right path. Second thing is to try to have an integrated approach, so touch all the different sectors of in the responsibility of municipality. Third point is to have the courage to invest financial resources, even if are only local resources, so it means that it's a big effort. And the most important thing is the participation of people with disabilities. Nothing on us without us. You know, this is the most important slogan that associations of people with disabilities approved, and we think this is a working methodology. Everything was shared and is still shared with them, and this is the most valuable thing, we are sure. So I will try to be this way. Maybe you can...
That way.
That way? Sorry. Okay. Okay. So I go fast because I told you the main points I wanted to present. Here you find the main steps that our municipality adopted since 2011. So the UN Convention was adopted with a formal decree. Then we adopted a welfare development plan. And this was very important because the culture of accessibility was, and the active participation of association of persons with disability was one of the main points of the plan. Then we adopted with a formal decree, the local plan to eliminate architectural barriers. This comes from a national rule, and not many cities in Italy have yet adopted it. And it's very important because this means that municipality takes a strong commitment to program the elimination of barriers in all the public spaces and buildings. And then, as you can see, to ensure full participation of people with disabilities, we built up a permanent table on disability and an anti-barrier task force for Expo 2015. And these are still working, and these are permanent tools of participation, because they are both participating by the public workers and the representative of associations. This is the strategy, the integrated strategy. We try to work on mobility, so transportation and infrastructure, the city planning, schools, which are still a problem in Milano, because there are a lot of schools that are not yet accessible apart from the first step, the first floor, the urban environment, the parks. So we started to have accessible parks and accessible areas for children in the parks, sport facilities, culture. This means the old museums and historical and artistical buildings, tourism, public services. So we try to spread our commitment in all the different sectors which are in the responsibility of a municipality. And upon them Expo, there was, as I said, the big boost to go further. These are the main goals, but I think I have already explained to you: promoting and improving reception, welcome and accessibility for persons with disability and for all persons that with reduced mobility that decide to visit Expo and Milano, activating, enhancing and make permanent and structured coordination and cooperation between municipality, associations of persons with disabilities and stakeholders, identifying together, sharing priorities and goals to address project and action that will be defined, presented, carried out by the municipalities together with all the stakeholders. These are the two mechanisms we built up, so the Permanent Disability Table and the Anti-Barriers Task Force. What I want to show you is that they have been built by formal decrees. This means that we're not only an informal participation, but these are structured, organized technical groups. And above all, the Permanent Disability Table is an organism that supports the municipality in the mainstreaming disability through all the public policies. So it's very, very important. These are the investments, as I told you, and for us this means an important effort because in Italy there are no national budget dedicated to accessibility issues, so the effort is only on the shoulders of the municipalities. But we are going on, as you can see, in 2017, so nowadays we are programmed other more than 10 million euros to remove barrier, above all in the schools, because as I told you, this is for us the primary, the main goal in this moment. So we worked on the mobility and transportation. What we try to do is to have this task force together with associations, we mapping and all the obstacles, and we individuate together priorities and standards. And then we work together with the technicians of our mobility division just to, work with precise objectives. And we worked on the accessible information about mobility, because what everyday associations tell us that the more important thing is to have valuable and clear information about what is going on the information and in a transportation system. So if there is, bus, the accessible bus not going on for some reasons, if there is an elevator in a metro station that it's not working, it's very important to know it in the real time. These are the situation. All the buses lines are accessible. This means not only for persons with physical impairments, but only with hearing or visual impairments. And we are working on the low floor trams and the low floor trolleys. Most of them, this is not updated, but the situation is getting better. So half of them nowadays are accessible. The situation is, the hardest thing are the traditional trams, because people from Milano, they are very linked to the traditional tram, so they would like to have traditional tram but accessible. This is still not really easy, but we are working on this. Then we worked, as David remember, on also about the parking lots, about the easy taxis. So when I arrived in Milano in 2014, I must say there was only one accessible taxi. Nowadays we have 24. We invested financial resources to help to sustain taxi drivers in having their car adapted. And we didn't have, at that time, an elevator in the railway station going from the railway to the metro, and we succeeded in having it. This is maybe one of the main projects we carried out for Expo. This is a website, expofacile.it. This means easyexpo.it. It was promoted, it was a successful project promoted by the municipality, the region, Lombardy region, all the association, the most representatives, and it collects, organizes, and presents useful information for visitors to Expo 2015 with disabilities or specific need. We try to work on all the needs. You can find there information about everything can be useful for a person that decides to visit Milano or at that time Expo. So about not only mobility, but about monuments, hotel, restaurants, museum. We use the Village for All methodology that for sure you know about this. There are more than 700 structures monitored, and you get information about these 10 accessible city itineraries that we realized for the occasion of Expo. All the information about emergency situation and for safety of tourists. Obviously, it is available in English and Italian, and there is an app also. This website now was converted in Milano per Tutti. This means that after this experimentation, we have been able to transform it in something available for all. And we worked also on, as David said, it's very important, the training of people that work in the front line, the front office with people with specific needs. So we invested money to realize with stakeholders and private and profit subjects specific training course. And we also realized, always with Association of Persons with Disability, a self-training platform, so each worker can go there and can self-train about the best way to welcome and to get in touch and take into account the specific needs of a person with disabilities. These are the 10 accessible itineraries. This was an idea of the leader of the Association of Persons with Disability, Franco Bonprezzi. He was a journalist, a person with disability, was really the greatest personality we had in Italy. Unfortunately, we lost him 2 years ago, but he pushed us to, he said, we know that Milano can't be accessible for Expo, but the idea can be that we realize some itineraries that allow people to go, get around, and know all the beauties of Milano. And we did this, so the itineraries are tents, they go through, the fashion quadrilatero or the historical monuments or the museums and galleries. And for each itinerary, you can find all the information about transportation, what metro can be used, which buses, what is accessible. And so people can go through them in autonomy. And for us, autonomy is the most important objective, obviously. Then this is a witness during Expo time. There we had some radio in the broadcast, and this is, as you can read, an American tourist with disabilities, and she said, it has been great. I was able to find all the accessible information and program my journey in Milano and surfing in the internet. And then she decided to come, and was a success. We had in Expo more than 60,000 people visiting, people with specific needs visiting Expo, and also visiting Milano. These are some data you will find in the presentation. Then here you can find other information about, for instance, sport facilities. All the swimming pools are accessible. 32 sport facilities are accessible for disabled people and for viewers. And we invest 100,000 to 200,000 euros per year to support associations and to allow people with disability to have free use of sport facilities. Then we implement a lot of information and awareness-raising projects because, as we know, what is very difficult, it's go further our community. We know exactly what we have to do, but it's very difficult to involve all the community in a city. So we try to organize the disability days, the welfare forum, conferences, workshops, seminars, but also spectacles and theater, concert, to make people more sensible about the accessibility issues. And then, for all this reason, not because Milano is accessible, but because it's true that we invest a lot of human, financial, and commitment resources. We received this European Access City Awards 2016. For us, was really very impressive. We went there, as you can see, this is our deputy mayor with the commissioner Thyssen, and we went there with our, I would say, colleagues of the association that received with us the award, and it was very good. And then we go further, but we are still implementing all these strategies. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much. Thank you, David, for your check.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Kiji from Japan. So David introduced me the details. Just I like traveling very much. So when I was 17 years old, I had a big accident by rugby sport. So first I wanted to go to the university. But somebody says, why did you go? Why you went to the university? Because after graduate, it is very difficult to get a job. And, but I just want it. And I want to go for the overseas trips. Somebody says, it is impossible, no facilities, no equipment. And always say that you cannot. But I hated this word. So just give me opportunities. So I just follow my thinking, my heart. So I just try to do my desires. I just follow my desires. So that was my first trip to abroad in 1993, 1 month in USA. I studied English. That is a great opportunity. You know, America is quite developed country for the accessible issues. So I was so surprised. I could use a bus. So any place they have a lamp, any place they have a large toilet. So this 20 years, my country, Japan, changed better and better. But 25 years ago, so my country is very poor accessibilities. So this is my latest travel, the 1 month adventure to West Africa, the visit Sierra Leone, Guinea, Senegal, all by alone. But you know that there are no accessible facilities, but the people is there. So there are many kind peoples. There are some bad peoples. That is the world. So I always helped by kind peoples. So in 2012, 5 years ago, I visited Iran. So no information, but people are very kind. So I visited Mashhad, Shia holy place. The mosque was opened for everybody. I'm not Muslim, but I could enter the mosque. Every day, about 100,000 people pray together. So I was so surprised. The mosque has 100 of rental wheelchair inside, because every day many elder people come to the mosque. The very large mosque, so somebody has a difficulty to walk a long distance. They rent wheelchairs. Some helpers push them. So I mean I was so surprised that Iran, the holy place, is quite kind for everybody. Also, they have a new transportations, LRTs. LRTs has without any steps, so I can go to the mosque and the hotels and the bus stations very easily. So I was so happy to see such a challenge. My favorite country is India, because low-cost country. Maybe Qatar likes Indian workers because of low cost. No money for traveling, the nice food, the cheap price, and they have a lot of cheap accommodations because many local Indians like traveling very much for pilgrims. So why accessible tourism? So I want to say the two things. One is the new market. So my country, Japan, is now faced on the aging societies. Also, I think that Europe is also. And today, the many elderlies are very attractive. So after retirement, they continue to travel abroad. And however, also the person with disabilities has less chance to go traveling. That is, we must calculate the new market. And the 3-generation trip means a family trip with grandfathers, grandmothers. So if we have a grandfather and grandmother who has some difficulties of mobility impairment, and we cannot travel together. If we travel with whole families, maybe grandfather and grandmothers pay some more money because they have a good pensions. Some elderly have they always follow the financial support. So the accessible tourism tend to be said 3 keywords. They often travel off seasons. So me too. I don't like the density, because it is difficult to walk on wheelchairs. So we like to travel off seasons, and we tend to long stay. Maybe one city, 4 nights, 5 nights, 1 week, and not move so rapidly. And accessible tourism tend to travel with many more people. I mean, with families, with friends, and with attendants. That is the business chance, I think. And the accessible tourism means not only for leisure. So, this is a conference. If the business owners use the vouchers, so they want to go to the business trip, but that is not only for leisure, the business and the meeting, also the study abroad, go to university. Also, in my countries, the travel agents tend to focus to join the wedding parties, the grandchildren, and people, elderlies, want to go to visit grave and go to the music, concert, museum. Also, the tourism is not only for holidays. It's based on the daily life. So if we make more accessible societies, so local peoples get more easy to go outside. Also, not only for persons with disabilities, of course. I think everybody has some difficulties when we go to another countries. I think Muslims, so you come to Japan, you have a big trouble or the food. So Japan, my country, finally understand how Muslims have difficulties to go to the restaurant. So now we try to promote which restaurant has a halal food, which restaurant has vegetarians, even though they don't have some special meat. So we should show what materials made by. That is more important. And also language. Language is a big problem. Everybody, I mean the accessible tourism is not only for small group. Everybody has a difficulty. So that is why we should more think about accessible tourism. Okay, next, please. Just go next. Uh-oh. Okay, next issues. So no information means nobody comes. So especially for the mobility impairment, we always afraid when we visit somewhere. If they don't have a wheelchair toilet, we missed. So when we visit temples, they have many steps, we cannot see. So we always afraid. So change anxieties to the possibilities. So I think the Qatar you have a good buildings and the facilities. If they have facilities, we should more promote, advertise, publicity to all. So information is very important. Isabel said that Milan Expo focus on the website. That is maybe it's one of the reasons is the success. So always information is very important. So I was so happy to the Accessible Qatar. You now try to the nice challenge. So my association with the Japan Accessible Tourism Centers, that is an information centers for incoming tourists from overseas countries. And we put many photos because the photos easy to understand. So if people don't speak English, let's show the examples. This is the most famous temple in old capital Kyoto. Kiyomizu temples located on a hillside. So, however, today, the temple has one wheelchair accessible route. So it shows red lines. So now it is possible to go around on wheelchairs. But unfortunately, the information is only in Japanese. That is why I introduced in English. Next. Next photo is the hotel accessible rooms. So the users need a fact. And even though the same wheelchair users, they have different needs. So maybe somebody can use these facilities, somebody cannot. Users define they choose. So if the restaurant have some steps, some wheelchairs can go because they want to eat. But some wheelchair users don't want to go because it has the steps. So users choose. So that is why the tourist sectors open the fact. The next, tourism is, I think, the big main three parts: hotel and the transportations, destinations. So each sector should be engaged, should be chained. Only the hotel, they have accessible rooms, but no transportations. It's still difficult to travel. So Qatar, Doha, maybe the problem is the transportations. You are lack of public transportations. But I heard you have a metro 2 years later. But that is maybe it makes more easier for wheelchair users and foreign tourists to go around. Okay. Okay, the skip. I like watching soccer. So tonight I will go to the stadium, Al Rayyan. Al Rayyan has today the ACL match. I will go there. Somebody go there to me there. When I travel abroad, I always go to the soccer stadium, baseball stadium. I like watching sport. So you know the FIFA and IPC has a strong regulations. I think the 0.5% of wheelchair sheet. So in 2002, Japan and Korea had a host country of a soccer World Cup. We made a lot of wheelchair sheet, but nobody's there because unfortunately we didn't have ticket selling systems. So I mean, today I know that FIFA has they sell the wheelchair sheet, but if you sell the wheelchair sheet, so we need transportations, also accommodations. So do not make only stadium. Please think about transportations, hotels, or engage. And America's stadium is about 1% of, they have 1% wheelchair seat. However, no 1% wheelchair guest. So many elderlies or the heavyweight, so who cannot go up and down stairs, so they also sit down the wheelchair sheet. I think that no 1% wheelchair customers, of course. So I mean that please make the target is enlarged. So for example, my ideas with baby buggies or the elderly. So I mean when we make facilities, we need users. So if there are no users, it's nonsense. Okay, next please. So last word, how can we get people's understanding of accessibilities? So I want to say that everybody become minorities. That is why respect each differences. So do not make a line between disabilities and non-disabilities. So I say again, when we go abroad, we always face some difficulties. We become minorities. So disability is not human qualities. So inconvenience change by environment. So no 100% with non-disabilities, no 100 persons with disabilities. So I hope that everyone can travel anywhere they want, inshallah.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here in Qatar for this initiative of accessible tourism. It's something that's been dear to my heart for a long time, and I better start my stopwatch or I'll get crucified by the timekeeper sitting here in the front row. It's interesting to follow Kijip because you've seen a traveller's perspective. Now, if anything today, I want to change the pace a little bit and I want to have a look at the psyche behind accessible tourism. What is accessible tourism? How big is the market? And how do we move from the word access to actually creating accessible tourism product? Because to me, there is a big difference. I'm going to start with a short video.
When I had my injury in 1973, I was pretty much told not to expect very much living with the kind of disability that I was going to face. And you know what's interesting is that at first I really started to believe that because of my own attitude about what life with a disability was all about.
After I had my accident, I definitely had to get used to how other people perceived me. It wasn't just how I perceived myself anymore, but how my friends and family and the general public looked at me.
I did face teasing and that kind of thing where, you know, you're called Captain Hook or something like that, which is never a fun thing to go through. But most of the things were just barriers that I put on myself.
Of course, you face people with different attitudes about blindness. Some of them, they think that, you know, blind people are in a certain closed black spot that they don't know anything about the world around them.
One of my favorite quotes from one of the students that we work with who's in a chair is, "I want people to see me for me, not the chair."
One of the biggest barriers that people with disabilities face is accessibility. And if we look at the built environment, it isn't just getting into a building for people who are in wheelchairs. It's people who have mobility challenges, people who have visual or hearing challenges, people who have some cognitive challenges in recognizing signage and location. And it's not just people who have those existing permanent disabilities, it's also those who have perhaps a temporary injury.
What we're trying to do is move the world on from a medical model of disability, where what we think about disability is this person's in a chair, this person has a spinal cord injury, this person is deaf. Well, that's not disability. A disability only arises when you set that alongside a barrier. And so what we want to do is remove those barriers so that being in a chair is no longer a disability because it doesn't hold you back from doing anything.
What I really want from the community is for them to recognize that we are equals and that they shouldn't look down on us.
It's really important that everybody gets an equal chance to take part in the things we do. Thinking about your own attitudes and your own perceptions and considering disability and accessibility and everything you do, those are all things that people can do to change the lives of people with disabilities.
Interesting comment there. We need to change the focus a little bit on how we think. A disability only arises when it's confronted by a barrier. So what we need to start thinking about is the tourism product. But why should you actually care? Some global statistics. This one's from some work Simon Darcy did in Australia that put the tourism dollar back in 2008. This is an old statistic, at $8 billion. Recent work from the US by Open Doors put the accessible tourism budget at $17 billion and the UK at $14.3 billion, and that was in 2014. It's been coined as the purple pound and is one of the most underserviced markets in tourism. What does that actually mean? It means that accessible tourism will represent 25% of the tourism spend by 2020. Because what we often do when we think of disability is we think of disability numbers. We don't think of the tourism number. And no one with a disability travels alone. Everybody travels with a multiplier, and that is around about 2.8 people. It is higher for things like weddings and the mice market. So forget disability stats, start thinking about the market stats. Some recent work from the UK has actually quantified that. This is 2014, the overnight market currently sits at 20% of the UK market. The overnight market at 14%, so it was day trip market 20%. But the interesting stats down there at the bottom corner. Between 2009 and 2013, accessible tourism grew at 33% against total tourism growth of only 19%. We often get confused when we talk about accessible tourism because we always think about wheelchairs. 47% of the market is long-term illnesses. A big proportion of that are people with diabetes and the ageing population, where catering for their insulin storage needs is one of the biggest things tourism operators can do and perhaps one of the cheapest. Other interesting stat on that screen is that people with a disability actually tend to spend more and stay longer than the general traveller. Why is this happening? What's driving the growth rate? It is largely being driven by the baby boomers who are retiring, and stats work done by McKinsey Corporation has put 60% of US wealth in the hands of the baby boomers. They control 40% of the spending, and in areas like tourism and leisure, it's as high as 50% of the spending. So how does that affect disability? Simple statistics here. At age 65, 40% of the population have some form of disability, whether it is by accident, birth, or age acquired. By the time that reaches 75, it's up to 60% of the population. These are the people with money and time on their hands that love travelling. And this market is growing. Remember, they only started to retire in 2011. The baby boomer generation goes for 20 years. I'd like to see many other investment propositions that guarantee a 20% return on investment for investing in accessible tourism. Okay, this is a question for the audience. What distinguishes disability from any other minority group? Anybody? Disability is the only minority group that anybody can join in an instant. Now think about that for a minute. That means that the disability community is made up from people from every walk of life, every socio-economic group, and every aspirational need. If anything, it's skewed to the more adventurous because the more adventurous are represented more highly in accident statistics. So, when we think of disability, we tend to medically define it at that purple vertical line. The majority of people tend to look further down and look at the profoundly disabled. This is what I call the continuum of ability. The tourism industry over the years has been very, very, very adept at providing high-level support, not for people with disability, but for normal tourism. The luxury market has a very high staff to client ratio. Anyone ever been on a trek to Nepal or any form of climbing expedition? The ratios of staff to client can get as high as 11:1. Tourism industry can supply very, very high level support. What it hasn't looked at is how it applies that same methodology and thinking to the disability market. In reality, that vertical dotted purple line stretches right up into the far right-hand side of that graph because there are plenty of people with disabilities, as Kiji has already said, doing all sorts of things that traditionally we don't believe they can do. How does that affect what we need to do? Often, and it's hidden down the bottom there, often when we think of disability, we think at the built infrastructure part. it becomes part of the risk management procedure. It becomes the same as fire extinguishers and emergency evacuations. What we don't think of it is from a product development point of view. What we're not doing is talking to people like Kidji and saying, okay, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And how can we cater and build tourism product right from the start? We certainly fail badly in then extrapolating that out and developing marketing tools to sell accessible tourism, even where the facilities are first rate. And I had the opportunity yesterday of hopping on your hop-on, hop-off bus here in Doha. I was amazed to see it was fully accessible. 2 wheelchair spots on every bus, and yet the website on the accessible bus doesn't mention the fact that it is at all. It's a selling point. The other thing that's developing around that people ought to be cognizant on is some new equipment that's becoming available. The trail rider on the previous slide, canoes, beach wheelchairs, particularly relevant here, some of the beautiful beaches, off-road hand cycles, new sports of chair skating, water skiing, rock climbing. And another very simple thing, these mats are not widely used yet, but as an investment they're relatively cheap. They're for about $1,200 US a length. It's not a big investment for resorts or councils or local government to provide easy beach access. One of the things that I often get asked is, accessible tourism bill, it's expensive, it costs a fortune, you've got to build hotel rooms, you've got to do everything else. But there's a lot of little things. How many people have actually seen on reception desks, elderly people walk up, try and prop their walking stick against the thing, having it fall open? They've either got to bend down and try and pick it up, or someone's got to come around from behind the counter to help them. A walking stick holder screwed to the front of a counter is 50 cents. These simple little things can make a huge difference. Water bowls for service dogs. Things like drinking stores for quadriplegics or people with arthritis that can't pick up their wine glasses at events. Attendants with umbrellas if it's raining for wheelchair users not to get soaked from getting their cars or getting off public transport into the venue. I'm going to go through some quick examples here. This is Jervis Bay Wild. This is in New South Wales in Australia. It's a $70 million catamaran which is fully roll-on, roll-off from bow to stern. You know what made the biggest difference to that experience? A 3,500 winch at the back that allowed people with mobility difficulties to actually get into the boom net. It's the thing that gave the owner of that the greatest satisfaction, seeing that young girl actually getting down and enjoying that with her friends. It's thinking through the whole experience, not just the access. Moonlit Sanctuary is a small operator, so accessibility is not confined to those with big budgets. Here, all the paths are hard gravel. They're rolled and compacted on a weekly basis. Everything is benches every 200 metres for the elderly to sit down and have a rest. The most important thing is a piece of plastic tube with holes in it that allowed him to height adjust the branches so that everybody, regardless of height, whether they're wheelchair users or young children, could experience cuddling a koala. Again, it's often the cheapest little things that make the huge difference to the overall experience. Phillip Nature Parks is a major attraction in Victoria, but I'm not going to talk about their accessibility. I'm taking that as a given. Where they set a new benchmark was the way they handled it. This is the front page of their website. Accessibility is a product. It is right up front, right in the middle of the homepage, and what that says to everybody with a disability is we not only know and have the facilities, we actually appreciate your business and want you to come. Sends a really powerful marketing message. Too often we look at things like that and ignore the whole destination. This is another example from New South Wales and Australia, where now the Shoalhaven Council is creating a whole destination-wide accessible tourism plan and have created their website, and the words on the website say it all. It's destination marketing. We are accessible. There are places to go, places to eat, things to do, and places to stay. Inclusion is more than just creating stuff. It's important to be seen and to be incorporated and inclusive. This is from the Josco glass factory in Deggendorf in Germany. Parking signs are brilliant because they're all done in the context of everything else. This is from the Gold Coast in Australia. And my personal favourite from the Carter Observatory in Wellington, New Zealand, that took it to a whole new level. But it's being inclusive. It's using the same graphics throughout that you would in your normal style for the whole thing. And have some fun. This is a Visit England campaign where Visit England picked 5 regions to become accessible. You know, relaxation, romance and ramps, sun, sea and step-free access, history, heritage and handrails. So once you build the product, start selling it. It then actually creates the business, it encourages people to come, and your tourism operators then start to see the economic rewards. If you don't tell anybody, it's not like the Field of Dreams where build it and they will come. When it comes to accessible tourism, apprehension or not knowing is the greatest barrier. Build it, market it, and have them come. I'll go through this really quickly. I'm not going to say this lightly. When I say throw away your disability action plans, don't necessarily throw away your disability action plans. They are purely a stepping stone to enable you to incorporate accessibility into all of your operational plans so that ultimately you don't need a disability action plan. Look at customers, whoops, it's getting ahead of me now. Look at travellers with a disability as customers and start building inclusive experiences, not access. It is a business opportunity, as I said, it's a 20-year investment and they don't come much better than this. Remember the little cheap things, like if you're a tour operator and you're doing a day tour, buy a car fridge and put it at the front of your bus with ice in it for people to put their insulin so it doesn't go off during the day. That's about $20 worth. Develop a destination-wide thinking and then market it and market it as you would any other tourism product. I'm going to finish with a classic quote from Magnus Borland, who's the accessibility director of Scandic Hotels. Why is it that one day I'm a customer and the next day I'm disabled? That's the mindset that we need to change. Thank you. Sorry, Mark.
I might ask somebody to do this for me. I'll see how I manage. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to congratulate Sasol and Project Qatar for its Accessible Qatar initiative and the mobile app. I'd also like to thank the conference organisers for inviting me to be part of this socially and economically progressive event. So, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was adopted in 2006. In the context of tourism, there are 2 articles that are particularly relevant. Article 9 on accessibility calls for states parties to ensure that people with disabilities have equal access to the physical environment, information, transportation, and other facilities and services. And Article 30 on participation in cultural life calls for states parties to ensure that people with disabilities enjoy the benefits of tourism. Now, as a states party to this convention, Qatar has signified it understands that accessibility is a human rights issue that affects not only its own population, but also visitors from other parts of the world. But of course, it's much more than that. It's also fast becoming a social and economic imperative to provide accessible infrastructure. The world's population is aging. Already, about 80 million people in the EU are affected by disability, and the figure will rise as the population ages. By 2050, a staggering 35% of the European population will be over 60 years old and can expect to enjoy 20 years of retirement. The latest US census puts the figure of disabled Americans at upwards of 70 million. These are large numbers in affluent societies, so it would be a huge mistake to regard accessible travel as a niche market. As Bill said, 40% of baby boomers will retire with some form of acquired disability. It's also the first generation in human history that is not focused on passing their wealth on to their offspring. Instead, baby boomers are intent on enjoying their retirement, which in many cases involves travel. This group, as Bill said, is controlling an ever-increasing amount of the world's disposable income and leisure time. And the more progressive destination management organizations, that's Germany, England, Scotland, Spain, and Flanders, for example, have recognized that promoting barrier-free travel is imperative in developing a sustainable tourism strategy. So, there's a happy intersection between accessibility and sustainability. An aging demographic means that in order for tourism, and indeed societies in general, to remain sustainable, accessibility needs to be a core part of any strategic forward planning. This intersection is being increasingly widely recognized by both city planners and destination management organizations, not to mention the United Nations. So in the UN 2030 Agenda for Global Action, Goal 11 captures tourism and recreation through its call for the promotion of universal design for accessible and sustainable transport systems, inclusive urbanization, and access to green and public spaces. In its 2011 declaration, the UNWTO predicts tourism will reach 1.8 billion international tourists by 2030. Accessible cities and tourism provisions, therefore, ensure full social and economic inclusion with the direct benefit of promoting more sustainable tourism markets. And this was recognized in the Qatari context by the 2015 UN CRPD report, in which it was recommended that Qatar officially promote universal design. This is the gold standard for accessibility, and one which all countries should aim for. However, to date, I believe that Japan is the only country to officially adopt the principles of universal design in preparation for hosting the 2020 Olympics. It's vital in this context not just to focus on the built infrastructure. The importance of fully accessible websites cannot be underestimated. Again, this is not only a human rights issue, providing access to information for all, but also an economic imperative. A 2016 survey in the UK titled The Click-Away Pound found that most businesses are unaware that they are losing income because more than 90% of customers who have difficulty using a site will simply not contact them. In the UK, around 6.1 million internet users have impairments that affect the way they use the internet. The survey shows that over 80% of these customers will spend their money not necessarily on the website that offers the cheapest product, but where the fewest barriers are placed in their way. In fact, 71% of these customers will click away from websites that do not cater for them. We at Lonely Planet hold only one core value, that travel is a force for good when carried out responsibly. We believe that contact with and understanding of other cultures broadens the mind and promotes harmony among peoples. Independent travel increases your resourcefulness and ability to embrace change. And of course, it's an end in itself. To enjoy life to the fullest, you occasionally need to take a break from work and everyday routines. But in order to travel independently, trustworthy information is the key, and that is Lonely Planet's reason for being, to help travelers get the best out of their trip by providing the information they need to make informed decisions. But here's the thing. The greater your need for accessibility, the greater your need for planning, using detailed and accurate information. But ironically, relevant and reliable information regarding accessibility is hard to find. Particularly in commercial websites, accessible information is either missing or hidden away under FAQs. What's worse, Customer-facing staff in hotels and tourist facilities are usually uninformed and unable to answer basic questions about the accessibility of their environment and their establishment, So at Lonely Planet, we've made a modest start by trialing different methods to produce access guides to different destinations. Our pilot project, Accessible Melbourne, used feedback from local people with a disability and local disabled people's organisations to supplement our core content. Our Accessible Rio guide, which was supplied to the International Paralympic Committee, was updated on the ground by a wheelchair user. For our 3 accessible guides to the UK cities, we've partnered with local DPOs to use their access data to complement our own core content. My proudest achievement, however, is the creation of the world's largest collection of online resources for travel with access needs, Accessible Travel Online Resources, which is now in its 2nd edition and will be updated for a 3rd time this year with an additional 200+ entries. And in breaking news, I'm currently negotiating with the European Network for Accessible Tourism to combine this collection with their Pantu database of accessible tourism suppliers. As a service to the community, all these titles are provided free as downloadable PDFs. All too often, suppliers of tourism services, as Bill said, complain that accessibility is merely an inconvenience, a costly compliance issue. In fact, accessibility is often simply a matter of training for enhanced customer relations. I've lost count of the times I've called restaurants to ask if they're wheelchair accessible, only to be told, hang on a sec, I'll go and have a look. And how many times have I gone to a wheelchair accessible restaurant, only to find their accessible toilet used as a storeroom? As for hotels, in many countries it's a legal requirement for new, larger hotels to have a certain number of accessible rooms, but it's almost invariably impossible to figure this out from the hotel's website. And even though larger search engines, such as Booking.com, have wheelchair accessible filters, there's no guarantee that a wheelchair accessible room will be reserved. It's always necessary to call the hotel direct, not only to reserve your accessible room, but also to find out what they regard as accessible. In the UK, for example, a so-called accessible bathroom can simply mean there is a grab rail over the bath. And once again, more often than not when I've called, front desk staff have no idea how their accessible rooms are configured. Now, I was going to show you a video of the Singapore Mass Rail Transit, Singapore being the most accessible city that I've ever come across, but I have neither the technology nor the time to show that. Instead, I will show you a few of slides from my visit to Brunei. So, this is how not to do it. When I stopped over there, I made sure there was an accessible room in my hotel, but it was clear that when I arrived, they didn't have many wheelchair guests. This food court was located across the road, but of course, I never got to see the inside. I've never seen such high curbs in my life. And actually, I was often stranded and had to drive my wheelchair down the road itself. My wheelchair could manage the 8-centimetre step up the ramp, but the 15-centimetre step up to the shops would not be possible. You'd think it would be easy to join the dots. There was scarcely an official building that wasn't up a flight of steps. Sorry, I skipped a slide there. So you've seen this slide from Bill showing that all too often people think of wheelchair users when they think of people with a disability. In fact, wheelchair users are by far in the minority of the disabled population. A Visit England study gives a breakdown of travel impairments, of whom only 6% are wheelchair users. There are slightly more partially sighted travellers and 4 times more travellers with hearing impairments. A study in Australia has very similar breakdown of travellers with impairments. In both cases, more than 1/3 of impairments are invisible. So I'm very happy to see that the Accessible Qatar app does have ability to filter for different impairments. This, though, is limited in its usefulness by its simple traffic light system, which is mirrored by all these major accessible venue review sites around the world. There are so many of these. To be found everywhere in the world, many of them relying on user-generated content. And although there is the capability to leave feedback via the Accessible Qatar mobile app, this may prove to be more difficult in the Qatari context due to the relatively small population, many of whom are migrant workers. Qatar also has a relatively young demographic, with only 1.4% of the population aged over 65. However, with an average life expectancy of 75 years, this will change over time. In my opinion, given that Doha is a modern, compact and planned city, a better model might be to use access auditors to populate the app with professionally obtained, independently verified information. In the short term, efforts to improve accessibility will benefit the economy through increased tourist numbers and the building of a sustainable tourism strategy. Importantly, emphasis should be placed on access to information regarding accessibility through fully accessible websites and a concerted program of tourism sector staff training in disability awareness. Improvements to infrastructure, particularly provision of ramps, curb cuts and elevators, will also provide immediate benefit for parents with strollers, people with heavy luggage, and people delivering heavy goods. But in the longer term, adopting the principles of universal design will benefit the local population as it ages, in Qatar as it does in every country in the world. I'm sorry to have to rush through my slides, but I was trying to keep to time. Thank you very much indeed again to Accessible Qatar, to Sasol, and to you for your time today.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I first ask you just to give a round of applause to our speakers, not just for what they said, but for saying it in time and keeping to time. Congratulations, each and every one of you. Because that means that we now have 15 minutes for questions and a chance to have some dialogue with you here today. So if you could, I'm going to ask one thing. If you have a question to ask, try to keep your question to 30 seconds. I've been to some experiences where the question takes longer than the answer. So if we can try and keep fairly succinct to our questions, we'll be able to get through more. So put up a hand raise, and hopefully we've got some microphones coming round for questions. Over to you.
Good morning. My name is Siham Alawami. I have been professional skier in Austria a long time ago. Had a lot of injuries all my life, so although I'm not really, I don't have a continuous, let's say, disability, but I've been always, as a normal, not disabled person, been using wheelchairs and crutches, and I only remember myself as injured or operated. And I was wondering, and this is a question maybe to the gentleman, maybe he's not here anymore, to Qatar Airport. I have been heavily using the wheelchair services at Qatar Airport, Doha, Hamad International Airport. And I was wondering, when airports are putting a lot of effort in providing excellent services like the one here in Qatar, how do they really budget for that? How can they finance that? Some places are poorly serviced. Like I was in Turkey. I was really very disappointed at the airport there. But for countries with huge airports and excellent facilities, what kind of budget they use for that?
Abdullah, would you like to share your thoughts on that one?
To be honest, for us, it's not just about budgeting for PRM passengers or wheelchair passengers. It's about budgeting for the entire experience for our passengers that pass through Hamad International Airport. So for as much as we try to enhance the overall experience, part of the overall experience is PRM passengers or people with reduced mobility, regardless of what that reduced mobility may be. So it's not really a specific budget for a specific requirement, but it's the overall experience that we budget for, and taking into account the requirements of all the different types of passengers that pass through the airport. That's without going through the details of the figures and facts.
That's very interesting. I think the fact that our access is not just about specific groups, but much more broader, is very important in that planning. I think we have another question from here, and then we have, if we have a microphone at the front after that. Oh.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. دكتور خالد علي النعيمي، رئيس الاتحاد العربي للموقوفين قطر. حقيقة أنا يعني لاحظت إنه الكلام منصب على الكراسي المتحركة دون الإشارة إلى فاقدي البصر وضعاف البصر، إلا في حديث الأخت الثانية اللي تحدثت عن كفاف البصر بالنسبة للمواصلات، ثم عرجوا على بعض الأطوال. بالنسبة لمطار حمد الدولي، تقدمنا نحن كاتحاد عربي وبمبادرة شخصية لإقامة تدريب للعاملين على استخدام التعامل مع ذوي الإعاقة البصرية وضعاف البصر. أيضا في الفنادق قمنا بكثير من الأمور والمبادرات الشخصية بالتعاون مع الهيئة العامة للسياحة، لكن هناك نلاحظ أيضا ندرة في الغرف المخصصة لذوي الإعاقة. أيضا آخر شيء، لماذا لم يؤخذ بالاعتبار ضم الاتحاد العربي لهذا الفريق العمل للتعاون مع الإخوان؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Abdullah, could you summarize the question for us in English?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
So basically part of his question, we, I think about 5 months ago, had a forum with the 2022 committee, which was about accessibility, and part of that forum was to commit to 5 commitments within Doha, throughout all the different organizations in Doha. One of those commitments was not just to focus on people with reduced mobility in terms of wheelchair access, but was also to focus on other forms of disability. Part of those commitments was to establish a working group to train staff within hotels and the airport itself to basically know how to deal with different types of passengers with different disabilities. And in addition to that, the question I think that's addressed is that the facilities that are within the different entities, so airports, hotels, and so forth, is not 100% yet there for all different types of disabilities, i.e. people with visibility issues and so forth. So, I mean, from our side, from the airport, we are working on enhancing what we try to offer in terms of facility-wise. We know that a lot of the, we have been raised actually, or it has been brought up to us in terms of the concerns that some of our passengers have, in terms of that a lot of our facilities were focused on people with reduced mobility in terms of access, i.e. wheelchairs only. However, within our toilets specifically, we are focusing on other disabilities as well, and how we can enhance that going forward.
Maybe I can put to the panel, because there's an interesting point you raised there. Is the concept of everything being 100% accessible realistic? Well, everybody's shaking their heads to paraphrase the summary there. But does anybody want to comment on that as how we can deal with that issue?
Is this on?
Yep. Hold on, we'll just get your microphone.
Where is it last time when we met that we need a comprehensive committee representative of all the people with disabilities and all the disabilities? Because still in Qatar, when we talk about disabilities, we concern only physical disability. I am Dr. Wafa, I am the chair of Qatar Rehabilitation Institute, one of the governmental sector's hospitals. Still until now, when you're talking about disability, you forget deaf, blind, all the disabilities, even the cognitive, and you concentrate only in the physical. Although the physical disability is the easiest to me to be accessible in the community. So what I need from now, I saw your paper here, and I am not in objection with anyone, but I am looking for the best. And we have to be well prepared for 2022, and after that for sustainability of these projects. I need from now to have a committee who presented all the people with disabilities and their requirements and all the expertise. For us as a Qatar Rehabilitation Institute, we have a CBR team who they are responsible to check all the accessibility in Qatar. But we are not involved with you. We are not involved with anyone. Nobody asks us. Come please as an official, departmental, come and check for us the accessibilities. Hamad International Airport, there is no way for the blind people. I don't want the blind people to walk with assistance. I need them to feel freedom when they're coming as a tour, in the event, to come and feel freedom that they can use the airport as we are. We have to feel equal. It's not a matter that, we are here to miss 1 day or 2 days. It's something that we have to plan and to work on it. This is one of the things. Most of the hotels in Qatar, right now, they have a ramp. But which ramp? Tell me to ask you. It's not a good measurement of the ramp. When we have like an event, check all the stages. It's not like this stage. They are either they fix some things and it is not a suitable thing, or they don't fix anything and then they give the gift downstairs because they cannot. The people with physical disability, they cannot come up, and it's against the rights of people with disabilities here in Qatar. One more thing I have to tell you: if we want to plan some things right, we have to think about it from now. And we have to include everyone because we are different abilities, but we are one community. And we have to think about the streets, about the scenario of the student to use. We suspect several disabilities coming in 2022, what we did for them. They don't need only hotels. They don't need only the Hamad International Airport. They need to use the street, the taxi, the transport. They want to go wherever. I will not restrict them and say for them, only use the hotel and go to the stadium. I have to tell them you are welcome in Qatar and use whatever you want, in Qatar, because Qatar is accessible for everyone. This is what my comment, and I need to see it practically from today onward to 2022, and even after that. This is what I am looking for. Thank you.
I don't think anybody will disagree. I'm not going to ask you to comment because I think you made your point very well. I will make 2 points. The first is that our understanding of how we provide for people with disabilities changes over time. So I've just seen announced the first airport that I know of that has created a room for passengers with autism as somewhere quiet, private, and relaxed where they can wait, where there is none of the other hustle and bustle of a modern airport around. Now, a year ago, that concept probably didn't exist. So I think our definition of what we mean by accessible and welcoming is really important. And I'm going to just close this session because I do want you to get the chance to talk to each other, to talk to the panelists, with one further thing. The Accessible Qatar app, to its huge credit, does ask us to look at accessibility from a range of different perspectives, not just physical accessibility. Now that is important for 2 reasons. One is it tells people with different needs what is accessible, what they can expect. And I think that's important. But I actually think there is something which is more important than that. It tells policymakers what is the state of play of accessibility for different needs, for different profiles within the country. You do not need to be disabled, to have a disability, to enter data into Accessible Qatar. But if you want to make a difference, if you want to inform policymakers, if you want to inform a committee who will make decisions and plan, you must provide the data. You must provide the information. SASOL, Accessible Qatar, have given you the easiest means of doing so. We have here an audience who will look and use that data. If we don't give it to them, we only have ourselves to blame. Certainly, one last thing, and then we'll break.
My.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد. دكتورة أسماء العطية، رئيس قسم العلوم النفسية وعضو اللجنة الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان. أضيف على كلام الدكتورة وفاء، صراحة هي يعني حطت كل النقط على الحروف. هي قضية أيضا إحنا إذا كنا نفكر في إمكانية الوصول المادية، لازم أيضا نفكر في إمكانية الوصول النفسية والتقبل الاجتماعي، والناس لازم تكون هي أصلا تحتوي كل الأفراد، لأن إحنا الله سبحانه وتعالى خلقنا في مجتمع مختلفين. فقضية أنا ممكن أعدل كل الأشياء وأسوي accessible يتناسب مع جميع أنواع الإعاقات، لكن من المهم جدا أن أنا أيضا أعدل في اتجاهات الأشخاص، أنهم نظرتهم يبعدون عن قضية نظرة الشفقة والعطف ومد اليد وما أعرف مين. لا خلاص، يعني المفروض أن أيضا يكون في احتواء نفسي واجتماعي أكبر وثقافي حق الأشخاص المختلفين، حتى لو كانوا مختلفين معنا في اللون أو في الثقافة أو في اللغة أو إيش ما كان اختلافاتهم، لأن الوصول المادي نفس الشيء، الوصول النفسي والاجتماعي. وأشكركم على تنظيم هذا المنتدى.
Thank you. Abdullah, can I ask you to perform your valuable service?
I think her comments was pretty much the same as Dr. Wafat. It's not just about mobility and access with people with reduced mobility, i.e. wheelchairs. It's about everything, including blind cases, hearing aids, and so forth. So it's not just about that. It's looking at the bigger picture. And as some of the colleagues here in the panel also said in their previous presentations, can we please everyone? Is accessibility just about wheelchair passengers, or is it looking at the bigger picture and trying to accommodate what we can with what we have? Thank you.
David.
Yes.
My name is Mokhtar Al-Shibani. I'm the past president of GATE, Global Alliance for Accessible Technology and the Environment. As we are looking to Doha to be a very one of the most accessible cities in the world, I have a question to Isabella here. Since Milan had this experience, what is nowadays at the UN we are looking for smart cities. Do you consider Milan is a smart city after applying all these accessible criteria? Thank you.
I lost my... yeah. So, well, it is a smart city, but I must say we can improve a lot. Speaking about, for instance, the public services, we are trying to make them more accessible, more and smarter, and what we are still missing in Italy, not only in Milano, is for instance, Wi-Fi, spread all over the city, and this is, I think we have to improve in this aspect because, for all citizens, this is an aspect on which we are working because we have to improve it for sure. I think it's not yet satisfying the level of, for instance, of Wi-Fi spread or the digitalization of all the services. But nowadays, in the international European ranking, Milan is in the medium, is in the average.
And I think that I'm going to close on that point, but I think it's a really important point. And again, it tells us our concepts of access change over time. The concepts of smart cities and accessibility is a relatively new concept in our thinking and planning. And we need to take account of those and constantly be setting our goals ahead. On that topic, and almost seamlessly, you have your evaluation forms. In order to raise the types of issues that we've talked about here, the importance of smart cities and infrastructure, about the importance of participation, planning and committees, please use your evaluation forms to give that feedback, not just on, yes, it was a lovely event, we had some nice coffee, but on what needs to happen, what feeds back into the process. And we're going to break now, because it was very important, I think, now to break for you to two things. One is, anybody who's a little bit older and has been here for 2.5 hours is thinking, there is a certain reason to break and I need it now. And the second thing is for you to connect to each other, to connect to our speakers, the organisers and so on, and to use that to continue this debate and discussion. So thank you very much, and perhaps a final round of applause for all of our panellists.